The Iron Cage is when Dorne sends his sons to be slaughtered in an obvious trap against Perturabo and his Iron Warriors. Or is it when Dorne nobly fights himself alongside his sons in an effort to remove his traitor brother and his legion from existence? The Iron Cage is one of the key bits of lore or event we know something about that takes part during the Scouring. This is after the Heresy, as the loyal sons of the Master of Mankind fight back and regain planets and systems from their traitor brothers. The opening I just did there gives you two versions of events, as does the two versions that we have of the Iron Cage and what happened. There is the Iron Warriors one, which feels a little more authentic, and the Sons of Dorne version, which I can imagine portrays Dorne's acts correctly, but could also be played as Imperial propaganda to get you to sign up with the Imperial Guard because they need you. So let's go over each and decide which feels more like the actual events. First, the Iron Warriors. The one real triumph in the period following the Heresy was the reason for Perturabo's ascension to the rank of Demon Prince. The Iron Warriors had been close to breaching the defences of the Imperial Palace, but had been stopped by Horus's passing. Afterwards, their empire was dismantled by the Imperial Fists by virtue of overwhelming superiority of numbers on Sebastus IV. Therefore, Perturabo set a trap for their Primarch by building the self-styled Eternal Fortress. Upon hearing of the fortress, Dorne publicly declared that the Imperial Fists would dig Perturabo out of his hole and bring him back to terror in an iron cage. Rabute pleaded with Dorne to let him help out, but just as Perturabo planned, Dorne was arrogant enough to undertake the mission alone. Dorne foolishly imagined an honourable battle, but this was not Perturabo's agenda at all. The Eternal Fortress was a sophisticated trap. At its centre was a keep sitting in the middle of a 20 square miles of bunkers, towers, minefields, trenches, razor wire, tank traps and redoubts. Everything to take down the Imperial Fists. Radiating out from the keep in the shape of an 8-pointed star, you've got to be on branding, right, were underground tunnels that connected the surface fortification. All the entrances to the underground network were concealed, and the keep itself was a decoy of no real value. Most fortifications are limited by the need to protect something. The Eternal Fortress was 20 square miles of killing ground, with every trap you could imagine there. Perturabo and the Iron Warriors waited below the surface for the first shots of the Iron Warriors against the Imperial Fists. To begin, the Fists started in fact with an orbital barrage. As soon as it commenced, they replied with a number of remote weapons silos, located well away from the fortress. The Imperial Fists countered with Thunderhawk-born troops, attacking the silos in a full combat drop of the rest of the Legion. The rest of the Legion. Remember that. As soon as the attacks on the silos were underway, the missile stockpiles were detonated. Thousands of tons of debris was hurtled into Sebastus' atmosphere, making communication between ground troops and fleets virtually impossible. A very clever tactic there by Perturabo. The detonation was the signal for the Iron Warriors' fleet to attack the traitor one. It was no stronger, but the loyalist Thunderhawks were on the planet's surface. Also, the K-ships had many Iron Warriors amongst their complements, eager to man the assault boats. The Imperial Fist fleet tries to hold, but was forced inevitably out of position. After a few hours, the only targets being engaged on the planet were coordinates, pre-planned by Perturabo. Under fire from space, the Imperial Fists proceeded with their assault. In parade ground formation, on a 4-company front, Perturabo watched them from an observation tower and carefully began to destroy them. First the minefields did their work, then, when the Imperial Fists reached the first expansive fortifications, the Iron Warriors manned their trenches and opened fire. While the trenches held the Loyalists' attention, squads of Iron Warriors with crack grenades and melter bombs emerged from hidden bunkers and attacked the tanks halted by the fortifications. The Imperial Fists turned back to fend off this threat, and for a time were pinned down amidst the tank traps. Once more they rallied and swept forward to overrun the Iron Warrior trenches, only to find them empty. So it continued. Perturabo dissected the Imperial Fists tank by tank and squad by squad. Dorne remained convinced that victory was in sight and pushed his men on. Perturabo pulled back some of his defenders and called upon others to hold, a stratagem that fractured the Fists, first into companies, then into squads. By day 6 of the battle, each marine fought virtually alone, and Dorne's troops were reduced to burrowing into the mud and piling up the dead bodies of their brethren for cover. Still, Perturabo remained patient. He allowed Dorne to rampage around the trenches, calling his name, demanding personal combat, content that the sight of the Primarchs' impotence would demoralise the Imperial Fists. The siege of the Eternal Fortress was to last for 3 more weeks. The Imperial Fists had burrowed into the kill zone and were unable to escape. Although his captains called for a breakout, Dorne would not give the order. He refused to believe the evidence of his eyes and continued to call for one last charge of Perturabo to face him. Unable to abandon their Primarch, the Fists prepared to die with him. If Perturabo had a failing, it was that he had grown to enjoy tormenting his enemies too much. He could have finished off the Imperial Fists at any time, but chose not to. Fortunately for Rogal, Dorne Rebute put the Imperium before pride and had brought the Ultramarines to the rescue, and perhaps he didn't want to lose any more brothers. The powerful Ultramarine fleet forced the warriors to back away, while their Thunderhawks plunged through the dust clouds to evacuate the Imperial Fists. Perturabo had no desire to fight 2 chapters and concentrated on preventing the Imperial Fists evacuating their dead and wounded. Dorne was a broken man. It was 19 years before he and the Imperial Fists could once again go to war. They left over 400 Marines at the Eternal Fortress, and every refugee carried horrific wounds. The gene seed captured by the Iron Warriors was sacrificed to the Dark Gods in return for Perturabo's elevation to Demon Prince. One insult had been avenged, and since then the Iron Warriors have lived only to settle accounts with the corpse on the Golden Throne. Now let's turn the page and see the Imperial Fists side of things. Imperial Fist chaplains teach that Dorne found strength in meditation. For 7 days he resisted the pain glove, until at last he was gifted with a vision of the Emperor. The Imperial Fists had wavered in their faith, thinking the Emperor gone, but they knew that he was still watching them from the Golden Throne. The Imperial Fists could no longer serve the Emperor that had been, but they knew they must still be true to the Emperor that was. Dorne decreed that the Fists would symbolically enter the pain glove as a legion and emerge redeemed as a chapter. I can see this as a bit of a motivation, especially after reading the Siege of Terror, where Dorne seems pretty broken up about his father's near passing. I can see that as a motivation, especially if there's some sort of vision or sighting that the Emperor's not just that corpse on that throne, that there's somebody still in there. And this also has a little sense, a little kernel of the Black Templars, in my opinion, them going on these crusades, these missions to prove themselves. Dorne knew that many of his battle brothers did not wish to found new chapters, as the Ultramarines were eager to do. There would be far too many left for one of the new 1,000-strong chapters. Leaving phalanx, he led these die-hard warriors against the Iron Warriors in their lair. His doubts gone, Dorne focused on the enemy ahead. Perturabo was a master of fortification, whose writings had been retained by Guilliman in his codex. Dorne had always been his match though, and what was more, his honest warrior's soul was indignant. The Iron Warriors had rebelled and lost. Their master was dead, and the Emperor still ruled. Yet still they dared raise their heretical banners over another imperial world, as if they had some right to be there. Dorne would not tolerate this. Without his customary caution and planning, Dorne led his men into the heart of the Iron Warrior defences. Again, this feels like a Templar Dorne to me. The battle should have favoured the treacherous trench fighters, but the Imperial Fists endured. They countered every ambush and fought their way out of every trap. Dorne was a colossus who personally turned back attack after attack. Ammunition expended, brothers fought in half-flooded trenches with combat knives, giving and expecting no quarter. Eventually it became apparent that the Iron Warriors could not finish them. For all their skill and ferocity, the Iron Warriors lacked the faith to make the ultimate sacrifice that had been demanded by victory. While they paused, the Ultramarines intervened. Gilliman had decided that Perturabo's destruction was not worth the loss of Rogal Dorne, and had brought his chapter to drive off the Iron Warriors. Cleansed by their sacrifice, the Imperial Fists immediately began their reorganisation. For the next 2 decades, they went into retreat, their successor chapters taken to the field in their stead. And Dorne used this time to retrain the chapter to embrace all aspects of the Codex Astartes. When they later emerged, their adherence to the Codex was matched only by the Ultramarines. One wrinkle I'd like to add in light of the events of the Siege of Terror, where Dorne is tempted by chaos, by Khorne in fact, and manages to escape by borrowing it into submission with military doctrine. Could that have had some effect here, clouded his judgment, and caused his noble heart and keen military mind to give into the blood? A possibility, certainly a thread I'd like to see them follow up in some possible scouring series, but please make it shorter than the Heresy. I think the Iron Warriors version here is the most honest, except when it comes to the depiction of Dorne, where I think the Imperial Fists version holds more truth. And rereading it for the video, I kind of like it a bit more than I did before. What do you think? Do you want to see this event covered in a series about the scouring? Let me know, and I think you could learn more about the Iron Warriors by clicking on this video.